Hello everybody and welcome to a brand new Elder Scrolls Online build video with me, Sherman. Today is the second build of the Templar classes, and that is the Knights Templar. I know a lot of people ask me why I've been doing so many builds lately. I'm just showing the community that there's a lot of options out there, a lot of variety. And the Knights Templar is one of those variety of options. So let's get right into it. Starting with the class itself, or the build itself, we are playing in an Imperial Templar tank. And the reason I chose the Imperial for this is because it has the right amount of health to have the resources it needs to be an off tank and be very supportive. Now you can make adjustments to this and make it a main tank if you want to. All you have to do is lower the health a little bit, lower the stamina, raise the health. That's it. And this build works just as fine as a main tank as it does an off tank. But I would say I prefer it as an off tank myself. The resources itself, the resource recovery rates and all that are pretty decent. For magic recovery, you really need it to be about 846, 800 to 900 for it to be really good for a Templar, because of one of the damage shields we're going to be using. Now, the other thing we have is we have a low stamina recovery, which is fine. Don't stress it, because this build can manage itself pretty well. Next up, we have a really decent weapon damage and weapon critical. There's a reason for us to have that higher weapon damage and weapon critical. I'll get to that when we get to the skills. Next up, we have spell resistance and physical resistance. They seem kind of low, but don't worry about it, guys, because when you buff up with this build... Oops. When you buff up with this build, it doesn't matter what bar you're on, you're always going to have the same. You're going to have 30k resistance with 27k physical. That 27k, just to let you guys know, is about 36% mitigation. So you're going to have about a 36% damage mitigation there, and you're going to have a 20, sorry, not 36, that's a 46% mitigation. And the other one's going to be about a 48. So you still have a lot of good mitigation there. Moving down the line here, we have the Lady, which is the Lady Meadowstone, which gives you spell and physical resistance increase. It's just to kind of give you that nudge to get you up to that higher resistance value. Moving on down, we have Minor Fortitude, Minor Endurance, and Minor Intellect. This is because we are running in Repentance on the bar, just like our other tank, the other Templar tank I released, to get that higher return of resources. Next up, we are also running Tri-Stat Food and Tri-Stat Pots. Now, I didn't explain in the last video why Tri-Stat Pots are really important to these builds, but I'm going to go ahead and show you guys this now. So when you use a Tri-Stat Pot, it takes this up to a 900, almost 1,000 magic recovery. This allows you to maintain your magicka pretty well. Don't worry about your stamina. You're going to be popping Repentance like it's going out of style to keep stamina coming in for you. Doesn't work really well in some trial situations, I'm not going to lie. But moving on, we do have a decent weapon damage, like I said, and everything. But I'm going to go ahead and get into the gear now, so you guys can see some of this other stuff. So, before you ask, why does this tank have lower health than the other tank? Well, the other tank that I made, the other Templar tank, is a main tank. This is an off tank. An off tank doesn't need as much health as a main tank, because they only tank in certain situations. They don't tank all the time. When they're not tanking, they need to be doing other things. So this tank here is a little bit of support and a little bit of DPS. And it just depends on how you choose to play it. So coming in on the support side, we are running the Sentinel set. Now this is a really, really, really good set for a tank to use. And there's a good reason why, especially on a Templar. First off, it gives you 2% healing done. So if you guys don't know, Templars get an innate thing called minor mending. Well, when I put down this right here, that circle, it gives me minor mending. You can even see it there, 4 seconds, and it'll keep re-triggering every second, saying 4 seconds. Well, when I go in here and I mouse over this Razakun, you can see now it heals for a little bit more. So it's a good way to get that Sentinel set to boost the healing it does just by a little bit. Now, it has a 10% chance of triggering when you heal somebody, and that's why when I did this before, you guys saw I did this, and I accidentally hit Vigor. Vigor's there to proc that Dwemer spider to come out. And when it does, it's going to heal, and it's going to give people back stamina. That's why this build doesn't need as much stamina recovery, is because it can manage it on its own. Now going back in here to this inventory, sorry, we're going to take a look at the other gear sets we're running. Now we are running a kind of an unusual gear set here, but I kind of switched around a few things with my Meridia's Guardian and this build, the Knights Templar tank. Instead of running what I was running on Knights Templar, I've decided to run Kvetch's Gladiator. Now this is where you're getting that increased critical rating from, and you're going to get, when the enemy's below 25% health, you're going to get 1800 extra weapon damage applied to your light and heavy attacks. I will explain why that's important in a minute. So we are running 5 pieces, Kvetch's. We are running a light belt with a medium helm. The rest is all heavy, and the 4 smaller pieces are sturdy. The 3 big pieces here are infused, and then on our sword and shields, we are running Nirnhone shields with infused weapons. Now I'm going to go over the jewelry real quick, because this is going to kind of throw some people off, because this, like I said, it's very similar to my other build, but this one is running 2 weapon damage and 1 magic recovery. This is the Templar has to have that magic recovery. It doesn't work very well without it. So that magic recovery plays well into use of damage shields. And the 2 weapon damage that are here, you can swap these out if you wanted to for block cost reduction, but you don't really need it. Because you have such a high stamina pool, you're not going to notice a difference if you have 17k or 29 or 30k, and you have like really high block costs versus what I have. It's going to end up being about the same in comparison, in trade-off. So moving on down here, we are running 2 Nirnhone shields. All major pieces, again, are equipped with tri-stat glyphs. This is to give you greater magicka and stamina, but also to give you good health. And I mentioned this in the other video, but if you look here, the tri-stat glyphs give you like 500 and something, while these smaller ones give you 351. So you're basically getting almost 100 less than this, so, or 200 less than this, so 200 less in stamina. Now I went with stamina. You, like I said, you can go health here, and you can put a little bit into health and drop this down to 25k, and you could be a main tank like that. It's that easy. But this winds up working out really well as an off tank. Moving to the sword, main sword again, hardening on the main bar always, because it's going to give you that cushion for survivability. Now, when you're learning to tank in-game, that cushion is going to be super, super important. But you can switch it out for a Crusher enchant when you become comfortable playing at in-game difficulty. And that way you can have Crusher up more often. So that's something you can do. Now, on the back bar, we are running a Crusher enchant, and that's because on the back bar, that's where most of our damage abilities are. And getting that extra penetration in there allows us to get greater damage from our character itself. But it can also be applied for group, reasons, that kind of thing, to help apply extra damage. Now, it only lasts for 5 seconds, and consistency on this is really hard for a tank to maintain, unless you're running like a staff on one bar, Crusher enchant on the other, with like a sword and shield. You run a Crusher enchant on that, and a staff on the other. Because when you put down like your wall of elements and you swap bars, it's going to proc Crusher, and it's going to continue to proc it until that wears off. So that is that. Now, on to the skills. Now I'm going to do just like I tell you guys in all my other tank videos or any of my build videos. Always unlock every passive you can of things you're utilizing. So if you're using any of your class abilities, and even if you aren't, you want to make sure, especially class-wise, to unlock all your passives. There's some of them that offer you benefits that you can use outside of that. So make sure you do fill up all your passives and your classes thing. Next up, onto the weapon here, sword and shield, all passives. The reason you want to make sure you maximize all passives, you need all these passives. Moving on down the line to armor, make sure, especially on the Templar, to unlock all the passives here, because the Templar class itself has a thing in the Dawn's Wraith, which is an active passive all the time, which gives you reduced cost in magicka and stamina and ultimates by 4%. So it stacks with the other reduced costs over here of the medium armor and the light armor benefits. So these 2% you get stacks with that, gives you 6% instead. So you want to make sure that you do that when you do this stuff. So you constantly get these reduced costs and stuff to save you resources. So light armor, top 3, medium armor, top 2, and bottom 1. The reason I always do the bottom one myself is because of the roll dodge. That 4%, that saves you resources, and so I always get it. And then onto heavy armor, make sure you unlock all these passives, and then going down the line through soul magic, make sure you unlock these for beneficial reasons, and make sure you unlock intimidating presence and banish the wicked. This is really important, especially in dungeons, because in most dungeons you're fighting undead, Daedra, or werewolves. Usually undead or Daedra. And anytime you kill one of them, you gain 9 ultimate. So this is going to be a good way for you to generate extra ultimate and stuff like that. Moving on the line, or down the line, down here into the Mage's Guild, you want to make sure you get the Persuasive Will passive. And then on to Undaunted, make sure you get Undaunted Command and Undaunted Metal. These are 2 very important ones, especially Undaunted Metal. This is another reason why I wear the 5-1-1 setup. I wear 5 heavy, 1 light, 1 medium, is to get this 6%. Doesn't matter, always try to get that 6%. Moving on to this, also make sure you unlock Inner Beast, because there is times where it might be situational use where you need a ranged taunt. Moving on to the Alliance, make sure you unlock, now this is a different one. Now usually I go for aggressive Warhorn, but I wanted to make this one a little bit more group supportive, so I went with Sturdy Warhorn. I know how everyone says aggressive Warhorn, aggressive Warhorn, aggressive Warhorn, but I want you to look at the difference between Sturdy Warhorn and aggressive. Aggressive gives you minor ward, minor resolve for 8 seconds. It gives you 8%, or sorry, it doesn't give you the minor ward, minor resolve. It gives you 12% critical damage for 8 seconds. 8 seconds. This gives you minor ward and minor resolve for your group members within 20 meters for 39 seconds. It also increases your max health, max magic, and max stamina for 39 seconds. Now, people will say, well, people are going to be using combat prayer. They're going to apply that minor ward, minor resolve. That only lasts 8 seconds as well. This is 39 seconds. That's the reason why I chose this for this particular build. Now, like I said, this is more of a support off-tank build, and that Warhorn plays into it. Next up, we have Resolving Vigor. You want to make sure you have that on this build. Next up, you can unlock Reviving Barrier, and make sure you have Efficient Purge for those situations where you need this. The places you're going to switch this out with is right here. You're just going to drop it right there where Reverb Bash is, because you're not going to be using Reverberating Bash all the time. But it is a nice thing to add some extra damage to your character. Okay, going on down the line. Always unlock all your racial passives, and make sure you unlock your Alchemy, Medicinal Use, and your Provisioning, Gorman and Carnosaur. I accidentally unfilled in the chef, I don't know why. But that's pretty much it. Now let's go over the skills that we have on each of the bars. Starting with the main bar, we have Shield Assault. Now I mentioned this in other videos with tanks. Templars don't have chains, and they don't have talons. So they don't have a lot of CC. This gives them a way to do a little bit of CC plus a gap closer, which is kind of like using chains, just the opposite direction. Instead of pulling the mob to you, you're going to go to the mob. It also has a 2-second stun on it and a small damage shield. So that damage shield does stack with the damage shield on hardening, the hardening damage shield glyph, so you can get a 9k damage shield. Actually, it's going to be a little over 10k with this, which is good. Next up, we have Pierce Armor. This is your essential taunt that you're going to be using all the time. It has a 15-second last time on the taunt, and then it applies Major Breach and Major Fracture for 12 seconds. That reduces the enemy's physical and spell resistance by 5,280. Now, on my other build, you guys know, I usually run Blazing Shield. This one I decided to go Radiant Ward. And the reason I chose Radiant Ward on this one is for the greater survivability that it offers. See, this one gives you 36% of your max health, but nearby enemies take so much magic damage when the shield is activated. And each enemy hit increases the shield strength by 6% instead of 4% like Blazing Shield. Now, you can go either route here, Blazing Shield or this one. It's really up to you. Now, the next one, I decided to try something new. and I decided to go with Defensive Stance. Now, you can go with Absorb Magic if you want, but I just find Defensive Stance to be really cool for some tanks to use, because you're mainly wanting it for the slotted passive. The benefit of it when you cast the ability of it isn't really used that much, and this one is just kind of nice. This one redirects the spell back to the enemy, and they take the damage that they were going to deal to you. So this can be a little bit more of a selective use thing, and it is a time thing. You want to make sure you time this when you activate it, because it doesn't show you a damage shield. In fact, it doesn't show anything on your character except that little spike of white lines. See that? That's it. Then for 30-something seconds, you have, or whatever, you have a chance of redirecting one spell back to the enemy, doing that amount of damage. It's a nice thing to have. I mean, it's pretty cool. And then, of course, make sure, again, these passives. You want these passives here, especially for the Templar tank. Next up, we have Repentance. Repentance is a heal that heals you and your allies for each enemy around you. But it also restores stamina to you. So you get stamina back for each corpse, and you heal yourself and your allies around you for each corpse. This is really good in group play. The other thing it does for you is it grants minor fortitude, minor endurance, and minor intellect. That's where the potion drink comes into play. You need this to make that potion drink work better. And then on to the final one, we have Sturdy Warhorn. This is where you're going to keep that. On to the back bar, we have Reverberating Bash. And again, guys, you can swap this out with all kinds of things. This is kind of a floater skill. But for this particular build, I went with this for a specific reason. I choose this for tanks for a specific reason. The Major Defile. It also has a 3-second stun on it, which is really good. But that Major Defile that can help you in so many ways, especially in dungeons when you have a lot of enemies healing and stuff. And then in trials when you have a lot of enemies that heal. This can help save your group a lot of stuff, because the less healing that enemies have, the quicker they die. Moving on, we are running Deep Slash. You can choose to run Heroic Slash on this build if you want. I chose Deep Slash because it applies the debuffs of the movement speed and the minor maim to 3 targets instead of just 1. And this just gives you a little bit better CC for when you're in your group play. You can get more CC out of them. Now you guys are going to say, well, you're not going to be generating a whole lot of ultimate. You got to remember, I'm not a tank all the time. So I can heavy attack a lot to generate ultimate. Next up, we do have Blazing Spear. Now, I chose Blazing Spear as a kind of a nice utility and group support. Because, see, you can use this as a synergy, and you can also use it as a way to increase your group's, kind of overall damage. But the nice thing about it is it can also proc Burning Light. So not only can this proc the Burning Light, but so can the Blazing Spear. And the Blazing Spear can sit there and tick. And for each tick of damage it does, that 548 magic damage, it can proc that 2,000 or 3,703 physical damage. Now, if you want to, you can also switch this out for Biting Jabs. That's if you want to. Next up is Resolving Vigor. This is what you need that high weapon damage and high stamina for. The higher the stamina, the higher the weapon damage, the greater the heal from this. Now remember, when I drop down my Restoring Focus, I get minor Mending. And that gives me 8% increase in healing done. My monster set gives me 2%. That is 10%. With my champion points, I have 20% healing done. So this is going to hit a lot harder when I do this. So when I'm going to put down this circle, I'm just going to go and show you guys. Now it is 11,000 and 8,736 to my allies. And I know to some people that's not a whole lot. I'm going to go ahead and turn around here. I'm going to let that minor Mending wear off. And as you can see, that's like 600 more points in healing on one bar, or for my allies, and almost 1,000 or another 600 healing for me. So that's a lot more health coming in. And if it crits, that's why we have the higher crit chance of 31%, is if it crits, it heals for more. So next up is Restoring Focus. This is your Major Ward, Major Resolve buff. And as long as that circle's down, you don't even need to be in it. You can move around and still get that buff, just as long as you make sure you come back to it at any time. And you can even do it like this, block and strafe, and move across it like this while you're fighting a boss if you need to. It's a really good way to avoid damage and mitigate damage. And then it lasts for 8 seconds after activation. Besides giving you a major reward, major resolve, it also grants you minor vitality, increasing your healing received by 8%, and minor protection, which reduces the damage you take by 8%. So it gives you 8% damage reduction, 8% healing received, 5,280 extra resistances. So it's a pretty good thing. Next up, we have Reviving Barrier, and this is same thing as the other one. It's a massive damage shield with a massive heal on it. This is just for group support. Like I said, this build is all about playing for group support. If you're playing in solo open land, run Biting Jabs. If you're running in a dungeon, run Biting Jabs. If you're in a trial, or your dungeon group needs some extra resources, extra management, that kind of thing, Blazing Spear. And then, like I said, you can swap this out for burning Blazing Shield if you want to. Now, I do have another ability here that I do run from time to time on both my Templars, and that is Power of the Light. And that's because I can help stack up a lot of damage, and then it does, you know, 15k damage to them. It's also a it also applies minor fracture and minor maim, or minor breach. Sorry, so it puts a 1,320, reduces their physical and spell resistance by 1,320, and it does a nice chunk of damage. So, really good little ability if you want to use it, and it costs hardly anything in stamina. This does cost quite a bit of magicka, you know, but that's okay. But yeah, there's a lot of things, like I said, that you can do with this build if you choose you want to. So, alright, so going on now to the champion points, very similar to all my tank builds so far. Like I said, a lot of my tank builds are going to use a lot of the similar setup, guys. And the reason why is because it just works that well. So going over the champion points, we have 37 in the Ironclad, reducing the damage you take against direct damage attacks by 15%. Moving on over here, we have 43 into both Hardy and Elemental Defender. This reduces pretty much all damage types by 10%. So this reduces poison, disease, and physical. This reduces flame, frost, shock, and magic. And then we have 37 in the Thick Skin, reducing any damage over time that you take. That means poison, fire, bleed. It reduces that by 15%. And that does stack with these as well. Now, that 8% damage reduction you get from that circular protection also stacks with Hardy and Elemental Defender. So, just letting you know. Moving on to the next one, we have 56 in the Bastion. This increases the effectiveness of our damage shields by 20%. This helps us mitigate a lot of damage with a lot more damage with our damage shields, and this is why it's so important to use this. Moving on, we have 16 into Expert Defender. This reduces the damage taken from light and heavy attacks by another 10%. So this 10% plus the 15% plus the 10% is 35%, and then with the 8%, it's actually 43%. So that's 43% damage you can mitigate from light and heavy attacks. Pretty good. 8 points in a quick recovery. As I told you guys, we get minor vitality, which is 8% healing received. We also get another 8% from our heavy armor. That's 16%. With another 2%, that's 18% healing received, and 20% healing done. So our heals hit for a lot. Moving on to this tree, we have 23, and that's on us. The heals on us hit for a lot. So we have 23 into Warlord. This gives us a 10% reduced break free cost. Now, if you guys don't know why I put points into a lot of this stuff, it's to basically save resources. The tanks break free quite a bit. They get stunned, they get immobilized, they get knocked to the ground, that kind of thing. This allows you to break free from that at a lesser cost of stamina. Next up, we have Bashing Focus. This reduces the cost of bash by 10%. This saves resources. Moving on to the middle, again, just like my other Templar tank, 43, 43, and 43. That gives me 10% more stamina recovery, 10% more magic recovery, and then 43 here, giving us 10% more return on our heavy attacks from magic or stamina, depending on what weapon type we're using. Whew. Moving on to the next tree, We have 56 in the Shadow Lord. This reduces our block costs by 20%. This stacks with the 16% from Sturdy we have, the 8% from the defensive posture thing, and then the 36% we get from Sword and Shield. That's like 70%, over 70% block cost reduction. So that's pretty good. Moving on over here, 15. We have 10 to Befoul. This reduces the increases the healing reduction of abilities like Major Defile, Minor Defile by 10%. And then moving on over here, reduces the dodge roll cost by 2%. This does stack with the medium armor 4%, so you get 6%. So it just saves you a little bit of extra, which is nice. Moving on to the blue tree, we have 43 into Bless. This increases your healing done by 10%. Great way to boost that Vigor for you in your groups. And also that Repentance. Moving on to this one here, we have... And I'm going to be, again, clear on this because a lot of people still are misunderstanding this. This is literally the tank tree, okay, in the damage area. Because you get Physical Weapon Expert, which increases light and heavy attack damage. Tanks focus a lot on light and heavy attacks. So getting 20% here is really good. Over here, having 56 gives us 20% direct damage. All light and heavy attacks are direct damage. Again, extra damage. So that's 40% together. There's also a lot of passives up here where they can be really good. Like Retaliation. Whenever you block a heavy attack, your next light attack used within 7 seconds is increased by 30%. That does stack with these two, making a 70% increase. Next up, we have Reposit. Anytime you block a heavy attack, you also have a 15% chance to redirect some of that damage back to your enemies. That's a really, really powerful thing. And then, of course, Butcher increases the damage of light and heavy attacks by 5% when the enemy's below 25% health. Remember when I was talking about Kvetch's Gladiator, why it's such a great set when the enemy's below 25% health because of that 1800 weapon damage? Well, right now you're sitting, the build itself is sitting at 2,151. When you get that to trigger, your weapon damage jumps up to almost 4,000. So your light and heavy attacks are hitting for 4,000 weapon damage. That's a lot of damage coming out of you. So that's why I chose that gear set, is to increase your damage capability, especially when you're not tanking. Now, you can get up to 120 in here, but this is really just kind of thing. Roll dodge an attack to set an enemy off balance. You don't roll dodge a whole lot. So, I mean, tanks do, but not to that degree. But yeah, it's nice. Moving on to the next tree, we have 43 into Mighty, 23 into Precise Strikes, and 17 into Piercing. We have 43 into Mighty. That gives us 10% physical poison disease damage. That means our light and heavy attacks are boosted by 10%. We have 23 into Precise Strikes, increasing our critical damage by 10%. Now, 10% is really, really good because, especially for a tank, because you're not going to get a lot more damage out of your character than that. That's why we put so many points into here, is to just give us that compensation of what this would give us. It just boosts our damage even more. Now, the cool thing is that when you block a heavy attack, you're not only going to get that 7 seconds to increase your light attack by 7 seconds, but you're also going to interrupt the enemy, which is going to increase the damage you do then from that light attack by 15%. So now if you add it all up, that's 85% damage. And then if they're below 25% health, it's another 5%. And then, for example, you set them off balance too, because sometimes you will set them off balance when you interrupt them. That's another 10%. That's 105, or that's, yeah, pretty much 105% almost. Or 95% damage done. Then you add the Mighty, that's 105% damage done in a light attack. Now I'm going to show you what this character's light attack is. Now I'm going to hit for about 2-3k normally. Now increase that by 100%. 2 to 3k. Now make it crit. So that's 6k. then it crits at make that 6K increase by 60%. That means it's going to go up to 9,000 to 10K damage. Boom. That's a lot of damage from a light attack. Now, it doesn't happen too often, but it is kind of nice. Otherwise, you still get a lot of damage output of your character. And then you got to think about this. When the enemy's below 25% health, I also get 1,800 weapon damage. So my light attacks are going to go up to about 4K, 5K. And then you add all that other stuff on there, boom. It's like a small nuke. That's a joke. So that's it for the champion points, guys. I know that I kind of like went through that a little bit quicker than my other ones, but I noticed that my videos were getting longer and longer, so I'm trying to speed them up. But that's it for the Knights Templar build. I hope that you guys like it. I enjoy playing it, and have enjoyed testing the heck out of this thing because it's one of my favorites so far, besides Meridia's Guardian. I will always be a Meridia Guardian fan because of it. But I do enjoy this. Now, if you guys are wondering also, I didn't go into the other set, did I? I did Kvetches, but I didn't show you. Knights Errant is the other set. And Knights Errant is a really great set for this build because it not only gives you max health, it gives you max stamina, weapon damage, and then extra weapon damage when you use any sword and shield ability. So anytime you use a sword and shield ability, including your light and heavy attacks, you get another 200 weapon damage on top of it. So that means all those abilities you're using that are sword and shield based are boosted by 200 weapon damage. So you can get a lot more damage out of this build. I'm going to just show you guys on the target skeleton over here how much damage you can get out of this build so you guys can see for yourselves. So there's Reverberating Bash, 4,227 with a crit. There's Low Slash, 4,367 or 76. Here's a heavy attack, 3,500 on a crit. My normal is 2,097. Now I'm going to show you guys with a heavy attack, if I can get my heavy attack to work. 6,000, 4,000. So if I get the enemy below 25%, think about that. That's 1,800 weapon damage. And then also my taunt does a decent amount of damage. And it does increase my damage potential, especially with the Crusher enchant. Here's my heavy attack. Here's my heavy attack. Light attacks. And then my Reverberating Bash. So, it's a decent amount of damage, guys. Not a whole lot, but enough. With this and Crusher, by the way, just so you can see, whatchamacallit does do quite a bit of damage there, and it does crit. So you can see it proccing the extra damage too from the spear, from the burning thing. You'll see it pop up every once in a while, not all the time. Like I said, it's a 25% chance it will. There you go, it just procced it. Procced it again. So that's just a good way to get some extra damage out, give some spear shards out to your allies, that kind of thing. Like I said, this build is all about group utility, some group support, that kind of thing, and also boosting your character's capable damage. So that's it for the build, guys. If you guys like the build, hit that like button. If you guys want to see more builds by me or just see more videos by me, you can hit the subscribe button. Sorry I made a mistake there with the gear sets. I'll try not to do that in the next videos, but actually this is my third time recording this video today because I had a lot of issues getting my microphone to work right without it picking up every little sound in my house, which wasn't easy. So, yeah. But pretty much that's it. So if you guys have any questions, comments, leave them in the comment section below. Other than that, thanks for watching. Until next time, have a wonderful day, and this guy might see you in game. Bye.